Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get into it with our guest today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please go like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Katlyn O'Neil on the podcast. She's an IFBB figure pro coming to us all the way from Arizona, where, I don't even want to ask what the weather's like because it's just going to make me jealous. But most importantly, she is our current guest, and she's on here to share, talk all things health and fitness, and, we'll get right into it. But first off, Katie, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
I am more happier than you are to have you on. Trust me. And when it comes to the weather in Arizona, I love to torture myself. What is the weather like today?
So it really is only in the 60s right now. So it's not great. But like 2 weeks ago, it was 80 degrees. So I'm freezing right now. You see, I'm in a hoodie. I'm cold.
Hoodie and 60 degrees. Your roommate who's from Minnesota should be ashamed of you. She should.
Well, disclaimer, I know that you're from Minnesota, but I'm from Buffalo, New York.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, I've been in Arizona for like 9 years. So I know what the cold is.
So for Buffalo, yeah, I know what the cold is, but she knows what the snow is. We'll fix that for you because Buffalo is notorious for being like the snow capital of the basically in the entire Western hemisphere. But yeah, so I give her props for that at least. But yeah, right now if I was in 60 degrees, are you kidding me? This is like, I wouldn't even know, and that might even be streaking weather for me. Because that's warm enough as it is right here. Based on the way it is right now. But before we get into that, because that's a sob story, just talking about weather up here. And I don't want to talk about that because we'd lose about 90% of our viewers because they'd be like, "Oh, I'm just sad. I want to click off." But so before that happens, why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to you, becoming a bodybuilder, winning your pro card, and where you're at right now.
Yeah, so gosh, where to even start? So I actually moved here about 9 years ago, and when I moved here, I was recently married and I gained a ton of weight. And I've been an athlete my entire life. I played softball for 14 years as a competitive cheerleader, swimmer, soccer, all that fun stuff. And so when I moved to Arizona, my brother's actually a personal trainer, and so that was when, like, my first time in the gym, and his wife was just this amazing, like this beautiful just drink of water that wore the cute fitness clothes. And so I went to the gym. I had on like my old softball shorts and a big baggy t-shirt, and I had no idea what was going on. And all of a sudden I just started working out and I absolutely loved it. And so a few years later, purchased my first home, and my neighbors at the time, who ended up becoming really good friends of mine, they both competed. The husband competed in bodybuilding, and my friend Jamie competed as a figure competitor. And at the time, I just thought it was something that I would watch from afar, and it was really cool. And I guess I would just keep working out. And I never, in my wildest dreams, thought I would actually start competing until I did it.
Oh, that's awesome. And before you got started, did you have any reservations about bodybuilding? Because a lot of people have myths about the sport before they get started. Did you have any fears, or was it one thing where you're just like, oh, this is interesting, I'll give it a shot?
I don't think I had any fears. It was just more along lines of like, can I do it? Like, am I going to be good enough? The hardest part for me, honestly, is getting on stage, and so being the center of attention is hard. So that was the part, and then obviously financially, competing is not great. You don't make money. It actually costs a lot of money, and so I guess those are probably my biggest fears when going into it, but nothing super crazy.
I love to point that out where it's like, unless you win the Olympia or anything like that, you are not making money in this sport, really. That's another thing where I was just, when I first got started, I was like, how crazy are these people that they're paying to basically go to these competitions and be judged and put themselves through, and they're not winning money? Where I was like, if that doesn't make them some of the best athletes on the planet, I don't know what is. Because you try convincing a baseball player, hey, pay us to go and play on a Major League Baseball team, basically, and it's just, yeah, that concept is just so amazing to me. But when you were getting started working out, there's always that thing that I love to talk about where if you were to walk into a room with 100, or a gym, I should say, with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to their diet, their nutrition, how many reps they do, what exercises they do. So many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. And if you were to walk up to one of them and say, hey, what'd you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you. What was that experience like for you, sort of figuring out what works best for your body? Because everything is so individualized when it comes to everyone's personal fitness journey.
Yeah, for me, I kind of had it easy because I had my brother as a trainer. So, and it's almost easier because he did not hold back. He's like, you look like we need, like, your tummy is sticking out. Like, if I'm standing there at a family party, he'll walk up to me and just hit my stomach, like, stand up, like, what are you doing with your posture, you idiot? So I
I
had
need this
him
guy in my life. What's his number? Jeez.
seriously. And so it was nice because I had him all the time. I could text him and ask him questions at any time. Obviously, how any trainers are, but like obviously having my brother, it was way better. So yeah, it was just kind of having him train me. It started just a couple days a week, and then to be honest, every time I go in the gym, even now, I just do what I want. I feel the movement. I focus on my muscle connection. That was really kind of my overall goal.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always thought about renaming this podcast a trial and error because that's really what it is. The reason it's called DD on the spot is because in college, every weekend, so Friday would be my one day where I would be the designated driver on the spot, which is why I came up with that name, where I'd always come and pick you up, but then Saturday was the day that I went hardcore, so I was able to balance things out. But when it also comes to this health and fitness journey, I mean, genetics play a huge part in this, and people do not understand that, especially in this day and age of social media where everyone's on these apps and they're saying, oh my god, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. People don't understand that you can only be the best version of yourself. I don't know how many people I've had to shake down and just be like, you do not know how that person got to that look. I mean, just trust me on this. Like, you don't know what entails with that. You don't know their diet, you don't know how hard they work, you don't know how they've manipulated their body through all of the all the stuff that they do to get into that contest shape, whether it comes down to water manipulation, everything that goes into it. But when someone's first getting started, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And they always have that one body part that just drags behind that they have to train to oblivion. I'll give you my examples first. My back, as everyone knows that's listening to this podcast, from working warehouse jobs in college, you either got a really nice back or you quit. That was like the one thing that took off for me. But I'm 6'3", so my legs and my lower body are just absolutely shot, where I mean, I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they wouldn't grow an ounce. I mean, it's a curse. But what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
So it's funny that you say that. We were just having a conversation the other day. So my legs overall, I have really good genetics, but the one thing every time I post a picture, my calves. I don't touch my calves, but I will tell you, like it's one thing I can tell you, I have great calves. And I'll post pictures and people are like not even acknowledging the fact that I'm half naked. They're like, "But look at your calves, dude." Oh, don't be sad. It's okay.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't even mention that, but calves are my number one pet peeve because I could literally, yeah, anything with I'm like, if you've ever seen the show Entourage, I'm like Johnny Drama, where I was like, dude, just give me calves. That's all I want is because I'm just one of those people where I'm just so tall and lanky. And the funny thing was with like baseball workouts, you run constantly and you do leg stuff, but they just never grew where I could do 10,000 calf lifts a day and they just wouldn't grow. So the moment you said that, I was like, oh my god, I hate her more than anything else. I want her off the podcast right now. I'm just kidding. But so now here's when you make me feel a little bit better. What's one body part that really didn't take off as much?
so this is actually a loaded question, and I have a feeling it's going to be a lot of what we talk about today. My tummy, my entire midsection is the worst. I have naturally very high estrogen, so I hold a lot of water in my stomach, and then on top of that, uh, with nutrition, I don't want to say allergic to. I have a plethora of food sensitivities. Yes, that and the problem with my food sensitivities is I wish that I broke out in hives or got sick or something. But the problem is when I eat foods that don't sit right, I just look like I'm pregnant.
Well, hey, I'd actually take that over like the hives and the breaking out and stuff like that because But hey, so what are you allergic to? What are all the ones? Because I don't want to rub this in, but I am genetically so you're genetically blessed with nice calves. You can have that. I'm genetically blessed with having no food sensitivities whatsoever. So hey, I guess we're even now in a way. But what are you allergic to?
So the reason that I say I wish that I didn't look like I was pregnant is because I love all food. I will, food is my thing. But there's a list. So gluten affects me the worst, which everyone always says that, but whey, wheat, gluten, egg whites, rice, bananas, coffee bean, cocoa bean, so anything chocolate. Um,
You poor
uh,
thing.
yeah, what is cranberries, just a lot of like random things, sweet potatoes. Pretty much the most carbs I should really be having are like potato.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, the moment that you said wheat, I was like, no bread. That's blasphemy right there. Where that's my bread, but and rice too. I mean, God, that's so. I was gonna ask you right again about nutrition anyway, but I mean, with all those allergies that you have, I mean, nutrition's hard enough as it is for a bodybuilder. I mean, it's one of the hardest things, and it's 80 to 90% of what the results that people see. I mean, like I told you before, with those friends that I have that, they think that they can go out and eat all the time and they still can maintain this weight, where it's like, we're young now, but wait, 10 years from now, and let me know. But what does your nutrition look like, being that you're so restricted in the fact that you're limited in what you can eat on top of being the restricted lifestyle of being a bodybuilder?
So the best way to explain it is simple. I eat the same thing all the time. And here's the thing, like, I love food, and especially now, just finishing a show, I have a really hard time controlling my appetite. So my stomach's super bloated right now because I've been eating a bunch of foods. But again, really simple. So pretty much any protein I can eat. Um, Carbs I keep, so I can have like rice cakes. Those don't bother me if I have just a couple of them. And then veggies. So I just really try and keep it simple. But also my body responds really well to fat. So most of my preps are done on the keto side. I don't want to say full keto, but like my entire prep, I had ground beef, ground turkey, and then if I had a rice cake, it had ghee on it. And so yeah, my body just responds really well to that. So
I mean, yeah, if you want to say, like, if your body was probably telling you first off, don't do bodybuilding, but you still did it anyway, so that's even more power to you. Where your body's like, we are not designed for, you can't have egg whites, you can't have protein. I mean, that's with protein especially. So, yeah, and eating the same thing. How do you mix things up with that? I mean, is there any like seasonings that you like to add, or are there any ways that you like to make it taste better? Because I'm one of those people, like I told you before, I have the work ethic when it comes to working out to compete. I just do not have I just can't do it diet wise. But how do you like to mix things up with that? Do you like to add spices or anything? Or are you one of those, please don't tell me you're one of those people that like it's the same thing all the time and you don't change anything about it?
So I am pretty consistent, but I will tell you, so I'll just regular seasonings like salt, pepper, garlic, onion. But I'll tell you, everyone always laughs at me. Anyone that knows me, I carry around a container of mustard with me everywhere I go, and it's spicy brown mustard. So yeah, that's like the variety of life for me.
Okay, so I want to thank you for mentioning that, because when I first started this podcast with bodybuilders, like the first 50 episodes, I would do a questionnaire at the end, which I got rid of because it would just take way too much time. And one of the things that I'd ask would be, what's one item that you always need to have in your fridge? I was shocked how many times people said mustard. And for anyone out there who isn't aware, because if a lot of new guests on the podcast since I last asked that question, is, mustard, it's 0 calories. So these bodybuilders, I mean, they drink it like it's none. I personally am a ketchup guy through and through. I've never enjoyed mustard, but
Love
yeah.
ketchup.
Oh yeah, I mean, but if they could ever make like like a calorie free ketchup, and I don't know if they've had made one, I would hop on that as well. But yeah, mustard, that is the unsung thing when it comes to the seasoning on the food. But a myth and stereotype that I love to bust in this podcast, and we discussed it like very briefly before we started recording, is it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, but so many women still have that fear that if they walk into the gym and they even look at the weights, they just think it's just looking at them, hey, I'm gonna gain 50, yeah, I'm gonna Hulk out basically, yeah. And it's like, like I told you before, I'd spend my entire life savings to train with you. Then you have found the secret that everyone's looking for. And, they just run to the cardio machines. But did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you still hear that all the time.
Yeah, so along with living in the fitness industry, I also work in the fitness industry. So I'm the regional vice president of operations for a gym out here in Arizona. And at one point, I also was a trainer. I've kind of been in every position. So I've heard a lot of it. I've never had that fear because I've always just kind of known my brothers have always been really into lifting. And again, I told you I was an athlete. And so I knew the idea of working out. I just never really needed to because in softball, you run so much. And when you're young, it doesn't matter.
What position did you play
Um,
in softball?
right field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's what I played when I wasn't pitching, and it was because I had the best arm. It wasn't because I was the worst player. I was at that age where they were like, okay, you're in right field because you can gun down people going to first, and so yeah. But anyway,
Yeah, I was actually notorious for throwing from the outfield and getting people out at home. I also am super fast, and so they would rotate me throughout the outfield, and I was the pinch runner for the pitcher too.
yeah, I'm slow as hell. So I was just in right field just because I had a cannon where they're like, he's gonna throw some people out at home, but I'm not left field. Left field's where you got to be quick and got to do all that. But no, yeah, well, and that's the difference between softball and baseball. Where baseball, I mean, I got so much more room to run. Where with you, yeah, being quick, that's probably much more of a thing. But
The calves make me fast.
calves. The
Calves.
dreaded calves. I want to cut my calves off right now and switch them with you. Then we can then we'll see how that goes. But no, yeah, that and that's just awesome. But One thing that I love to mention on top of that question is, it affects women so much more positively, I think, than it does men, but it affects men as well, is that confidence boost that working out gives you. I mean, we have heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of women who have made life-changing decisions. They've either become more assertive, or it's just the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact every single aspect of your life. How have you personally taken the working out and, that confidence boost that it gives you and use it to impact your everyday life?
Oh God, I mean, it's completely changed my life altogether. I feel like it's made me more confident at work. I mean, I'm up teaching people, training people all the time in the position. And so it's just been a game changer. But I think what we were talking about with people being scared of getting bulky, one thing that people don't realize is if you are not in shape and you continue to eat like crap and then you add muscle, you're going to look bigger because you're just adding fat and muscle. Then everyone always thinks like, oh, I'm adding on all this muscle. And it's like, no, you're adding on fat too.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's another one too, where all these myths that we have. And, before I get into my next topic, because I usually say this question towards the end here, but you brought it up, and I mean, we're right on the topic here, is that, I bet the number one excuse that you hear is, oh, I want to work out. I just don't have the time. I just can't do it time wise. Where, first of all, everyone has the same 24 hours in the day, unless you're Dwayne The Rock Johnson. I'm convinced that he made a deal with the devil or someone for like that extra 27, 28 hours, because how he's able to do all that stuff. He's the one guy where I'm like, okay, that's not possible for him to be able to do all this stuff and still, be in that great a shape. But, you know, it's just everyone has the same amount of time. But with this COVID, I mean, everyone has more free time than they had before. I don't care what you say. And if you say that you still don't have enough time, I want to know what your life is like now, or what's going on where you're not able to. But what advice do you like to have for people that say that, that number one myth that we hear all the time of like, oh, I just don't have the time. How do you like to respond to that? Because I mean, I bet if you had a nickel for every time you heard that, I mean, you'd be having a butler right now serving you tea right now as we were talking.
Yeah, it's all about priorities. Completely. Luckily out here in Arizona, fitness industry is huge. The gym I work for is actually 24 hours. So someone tells me they don't have time, I'm like, you can get up in the middle of the night, but again, it's just about priorities. You make time for things that you want. And so if you want it bad enough, you'll make the sacrifice. I know we talked about sleeping a little bit earlier, but like you'll I'll sacrifice maybe an hour of sleep so I can get up and walk outside and do my cardio. So regardless of if gyms are open or not, you can get outside and do something, do anything, just move.
Yeah. And again, I do not recommend doing this. I have to say this for legal purposes, but let's say if you were to follow someone for an entire day from a distance, and again, everyone, do not do this. It's a creepy thing. I am just saying this hypothetically. If you were to follow them and log down everything that they did in a day, I can guarantee you would find plenty of time where they could have done a workout where either they were just vegging out on the couch, or just sitting around doing nothing. You would find probably at least a good 2 or 3 hours maybe or they're just scrolling on their phone. If you were to add that up, you would find that. So that excuse really doesn't work for anyone. But again, everyone, I have to verify this. Do not do that. I did not recommend you to do that. This is not for legal purposes. Do not ever do that. I am just saying.
Don't follow me.
I'm just saying hypothetically, if anyone's watching this, lawyers or whatever, I do not recommend this. I'm not promoting this. I am not legally charged to do any of that. But anyway, so going on, I mean, and you mentioned sleep too, and that is the number one thing when it comes to recovery. I mean, that is the number one thing probably overall in the health and fitness lifestyle that people just do not understand. And for anyone who ever thinks that, sleep isn't that big of a deal when it comes to, recovery, I always tell them pull an all-nighter and then go to the gym and then see how it goes. I did that twice in college and I lasted half the workout and then I said, okay, this is ridiculous. I'm done. But what does your sleep schedule look like and how do you like to maintain it, especially during this COVID time where, I mean, I'm a super lit night owl. Like you said, you're getting up at like 3 o'clock. I'm going to bed at 3 o'clock. But how are you able to maintain that proper amount of sleep? Because especially now that you're just off your prep, but when you're on that prep, I mean, sleep is almost impossible to get that proper amount because you're so tired and you're so drained. How are you able to maintain, a somewhat decent sleep schedule or recovery for especially during preps?
So when I'm in prep, I'm actually way more structured with my day. I actually get more sleep in prep than I do when I'm not in prep because I know, okay, I need to be up at 4, so I need to be to bed at this time. I have a hard time falling asleep, and so I use the supplement Blackout, and it's like game changer. So I also, oh, I'm not even wearing it right now. I wear a thing to measure my steps, and then it also measures my sleep, and it's turned into the coolest thing. That the first thing I do in the morning is I check my sleep, not for how long I've slept, but how much deep sleep I've gotten. And so before I ever tried that supplement, I get like 45 minutes of deep sleep, waking up really tired. And so I got Blackout, and it's so funny because I should be sponsored by them. I tell everyone about it.
Shout out
It's
to Blackout.
ridiculous.
Check out this podcast.
Yeah.
I'll send a link to them, everyone. Yeah. Yeah.
But ever since I started drinking blackout, I get a minimum 2 hours of deep sleep, maybe even 3 hours of deep sleep. And like I'll wake up refreshed, I'm ready to go. And so as long as I'm like scheduling things out, and don't get me wrong, there's days where I'm like, oh, I have to get up in 2 hours. I need to make sure I get my cardio in. Yeah, there's days, but just trying to create that structure, and then taking something to help me fall asleep.
Yeah, I mean, there are a handful, there are probably two things in this world that feel better than, getting that proper amount of sleep after a long workout because you wake up feeling like a superhero. One of them is a good PB&J sandwich for me, and I'll leave the other one up to everyone's imagination where, you know what I'm talking about. But, yeah, there's no better feeling on the planet really than those two things than waking up after getting that good proper amount of sleep. I mean, yeah, I mean, just waking up and you're just like, oh my God, I feel so well rested and I feel, so energized. But the bane of my existence, I hate it more than life itself, is cardio. I mean, oh my God. I mean, just from, first of all, like with legs, it just sucks for me. And from baseball too. I mean, we used to run all the time just for being a pitcher, but what is your relationship with cardio like?
So the thing that I hate is that all these Instagram models and competitors post like, "Oh, I only had to do 20 minutes of cardio 3 days a week and I got this physique." It's not realistic, and it's we talked about things being like your body is your body and your body responds the way it does. My body really likes to be on the thicker side, and so cardio, I hate it. But um I'm not a huge fan of sprints or explosive movements. And so even with this last prep, I walked. And when I say I walked, minimum 15,000 steps a day. When quarantine first started, my coach was like, while you're home and you have time, I want you to bump it up to 20. And walking 20,000 steps a day takes hours.
Yeah, I do. I used to do like 80-minute to 100-minute walks, and I'd get like 14 to 1500 or 14,000 to 15,000 steps. So yeah, if you're doing 20, that's a good, 2.5 hour at least probably thing to do. So that, yeah, that's insane. Well, the problem with me is that like I have to be entertained if I'm gonna walk on a treadmill. I have to have a movie on, I have to have something on. But it got to the point where during quarantine, I ran out of movies to watch because I did like 50 of them, and I'm like, okay, there's nothing else for me to really watch and enjoy, and I ran out of TV shows. So I stopped doing cardio for like 3 weeks, and then I'm finally back on it for like the last 2 weeks. But yeah, that's a struggle for me. But the number one thing that I love to talk about on this podcast, because I would have never guessed this in a million years, that it's the hardest thing for so many of these competitors, is posing. I mean, it's harder than your workouts. It's harder than your nutrition for so many of these guests. And I would have never guessed it in a million years. And the general public doesn't realize it as well. Where I like to compare it now to being a perfect driver, where you can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
Oh, nightmare. So I am super lucky to have an awesome coach, and I get to work with Whitney Jones one on one
Oh,
with my posing. Yeah,
yeah.
she's incredible and so knowledgeable, and so uh, it's just so hard. In the beginning, I would pose holding 5 pound weights, and so you get used to flaring your lats and holding your shoulders out while holding weights. The hardest part is when you're depleted and you're on stage and the lights are on you and you don't have any water in you, so you're trying not to sweat, but like just trying to hold that for an extended period of time. And you're thinking about every little movement that you're doing, every twist, the way it makes your body look. And of course, everyone always practices in front of a mirror, but when you're on stage, you can't see yourself to correct the little things. And so you're posing, you have to videotape yourself and see little things that you do. And then remember when you're on stage, oh, if I drop my shoulder, my waist will look this way. So it's definitely crazy and for sure the hardest part.
Well, and people just don't understand too. I've heard so many stories about, you get even more sore during your posing sessions than you do your workouts because the body is not meant to be in that flex of a state. How long into your journey do you think you really developed that, that muscle maturity where you're able to, be able to be in that state for a long period of time? Because if you were to take the general public and have them go and, do some of the poses, some of them would probably last only a few seconds before they just get tired out and stuff. But you guys are on there for minutes, sometimes at a time doing it. How long before you think you develop that maturity where like you're able to hold that pose for a long time without, wanting to just basically fall apart?
It took me probably 2 years just to figure out how to flare my lats.
That's the hardest one.
So
I was gonna ask that too, because that's the hardest thing for so many females and for guys too. I mean, I can't even do it, but for females, yeah, that takes forever.
yeah, and it's crazy because the more that you pose and the more that you hold it, like for me, obviously one of the looks that you want is for your back to get wider. The more you do it, the more your body just over time just opens up. So I want to say it took me a couple years.
Wow. Yeah, That's the same with a lot of people that we've heard too, that it does take years to really develop that. And that's why I love to talk about posing, because it's just something that's not talked about as much. But one other crux that I think you guys have to bear is the high heels, because let's be honest, you guys go through enough as is. Why you got to make them wear high heels when they walk on stage? It's like they've been through enough. But what is your experience like with those high heels? Because for so many people that can be a game changer for why some people might say, oh, I'm just going to go to physique now because I don't want to wear those things.
Well, the hard part was when I turned pro at North Americans, the floor is actually carpet out there. And so trying to turn around like on your toes, I actually like tripped when I was on stage.
Do they
So
hate do they hate the competitors? Why is
that's
why is
what
the
I'm
that's
saying.
like the dumbest thing ever. That's like having football players playing an ice rink.
Yeah, it was the worst. But now I I only practice my posing in my heels, so it becomes second nature. The problem is really there's like divots and bumps on the stage. I'll tell you, I just did Wings of Strength, and right in the center box where they want you to stand, it was where the stage split. And so there was an indent. And so as you're trying to turn, you're like rocking back and forth, trying not to fall. That's probably worse than just being on heels.
Yeah, that is insane how they I mean, you'd think that they would just at least get a level service and just do it. But yeah, that's the little things that go into the sport that people do not understand, and I just find so fascinating. But when you're on that stage, does time really seem to speed up, or does it seem to slow down, or is it sort of a mixture of the two?
You blink and it's over. And it's so funny because when I get nervous, I talk fast and then I also move fast. And so a lot of times I've looked back at a video of me walking out on stage and I'm like pretty much running to the box. I do some poses and then I like run off the stage. I'm like, okay. And then you reflect on it and you're like, God, why didn't I slow down and like enjoy the moment? And I don't know if you followed the Olympia, but one person that's great at that is Sid, who just is Miss Figure Olympia for the fourth time. And she just, man, when she walks out, she's slow and enjoying like every moment, every second is a moment. And so you have to remember to slow down because man, I will run out there in my heels and run off.
Now, I say that there aren't perfect posers out there, but there are people that are pretty darn close, and she's one of them. Where it's pretty close to being that. Where I mean, but yeah, she's great. I've messaged her a couple times to come on the podcast, but I haven't heard anything back. So hopefully we'll get her on, because yeah, she is a great competitor, and yeah, she's amazing. But I mean, for winning your pro card, I mean, so many people don't understand that that's the highlight of so many of these competitors' journeys, just because that's the affirmation that, all the hard work that you've put into this, has finally paid off. What was that feeling like for you when they announced your name and you realized, oh my God, I'm a pro now?
It was pretty crazy. And I don't know if you know this. So I turned pro in four shows. Uh, yeah. So I competed. So in 2016, I did my first show ever, and then I went to nationals and got 12th. And so I took 2 years off, and then I tried it again. I won the overall, and then I went to nationals and got my pro card. And so the one thing I really wish is that I slowed down to enjoy it a little bit more because it's just this amazing moment, and then all of a sudden it's over, and then you're on to your next thing. And so I was happy that I remembered that when I did my pro debut, because my fifth show was my pro debut, and it was recently in October. And so the whole day I was like, I am soaking this in, I'm taking every moment, because it was like the next big thing besides winning my pro card was my pro debut.
Yeah. No, and that's just, I mean, I can only compare that really to, like pitching in the state tournament or stuff like that, where it's like, yeah, if you can find something that makes you feel that way, just stick with it. But another myth that I love to talk about on this podcast is that so many people don't understand that look that you guys put on stage, that is not a sustainable look. You're not going to be able to look that way 365 days out of the year. And I think one of the problems with that is that, there's shows like Biggest Loser where people go on, they lose hundreds of pounds, and some of them are able to keep the weight off, where people watch shows like that and then they look at bodybuilding and they're like, oh, they must be the same way just because they work even more harder than those people on that show. But they don't realize, like what we talked about before, with the manipulations that you've done with your diet, with your training, that is not a look that you're going to be able to keep. What was that like when you first realized that, like, hey, this is not a look that I'm going to be attainable to keep, and I'm going to have to put on weight? And has it gotten easier for you as your journey's gone on to accept that?
So the first two, so I've done shows in pairs. So the first show, the grouping I did, man, I blew up after, because I don't know if you know, so there's hormones that you produce that tell you when you're full and when you're hungry. And when you compete and you deplete yourself, those hormones aren't produced. And so you don't get the feeling of being full ever, which is crazy. And it's really hard to manage. And so I've gotten better, but I'll tell you, I competed almost 3 weeks ago now, and I do not look anything like I did 3 weeks ago. My stomach is bloated. I am starting to put on weight. My face is fuller. It's not attainable. I mentioned it earlier. My body just naturally likes to be thicker. Unfortunately, this entire year, because of how crazy it was, I was in prep from January 24th until December 5th. It was almost a year of prep, and it is not attainable. My body hates me right now.
So many of my guests have dealt with the same thing where, yeah, with this COVID, I mean, it's really changed everything. But we'll get into COVID now because you brought it up, and I mean, it's one thing that's impacted our lives in more ways than we could ever imagine. Being that you're on prep for a full year, I mean, how are you able to deal with that? How are you able to deal with, COVID, because there's so much uncertainty when it first popped out? I mean, gyms were closing, everything was shut down. How are you able to maintain your sanity and, still be able to work out because with all this stuff that was happening?
It was really hard. I told you I oversee multiple facilities at work. And so I took for granted the amount of people that I see regularly. So what I struggled with was just not interacting with people. And so luckily, Arizona has a very large fitness community. And so we had like speakeasy gyms where it was like if you knew somebody, you could go and sneak in and use the gym for a little bit. And so that's what months of this year looked like, was just trying to find a place to work out. It's so funny because I'm actually looking out my window right now and there's a parking garage and my roommate's actually doing stairs right now. And that was a lot of our quarantine, was like just hitting up the stairs, doing sprints. And then my dog that's sitting behind me, um, he loves quarantine because walking 20,000 steps a day, we got outside and he got the benefit of that. So he's loving life right now. So it was really just resistance bands, sneaking into gyms, trying to make it work, running the stairs on the parking garage.
Well, on top of, the mental effects of this quarantine and, everything that happened with that too. I mean, just this journey in general, it is so much more of a mental journey than it is a physical journey. And so many people just do not understand that, where I mean, they'll notice, they'll be like, "Oh, Katie, you look amazing with the physical changes," but most people do not understand. Yep, we see. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a lot of stairs.
She was running the stairs.
Yeah, that's a lot of stairs right there. But they don't really see the mental change as well. So what was this mental journey like as you got into the sport and, dealing with all this stuff that's been going on? How has this mental journey been like for you?
It's a roller coaster. Most people don't realize, people that are in the fitness community, we probably hate our bodies the most. We're constantly like, you can never achieve, and I mean, unless you're four-time champ Sid, we can never achieve the perfect physique. You're always looking to improve, to change. And so it's a roller coaster. You feel proud when you see the changes and you get excited, and then you get depressed because then your body's changing different ways. And especially going into a show, you're hitting this peak because you look so amazing. And like, for one thing, I do, a lot of people know me because of my physique and how great I look. And so now that I'm reversing and getting softer, and it's depressing because I'm like, man, I'm just not gonna get the looks that I got before. I'm not gonna be able to look the way I did or feel the confidence that I did. It's a roller coaster of emotion.
Yeah, and it's not one that's it's not something that's really been talked about as much as it should be, and I'm glad that you brought it up. But I mean, with all this stuff that's been going on too, I mean, it's really been impossible for so many people to really, just like keep updated and keeping track of stuff, and Instagram has helped with that. But one thing that I love to ask too, because Instagram will never show this, just because as being a human, you're only going to show like the really good stuff on your Instagram. But everyone goes through those days where they don't want to work out. I don't care what anyone says. I had two guests on this podcast out of like my 450 guests that have said, "Oh yeah, that never affects me. I'm always, I'm always good to go." And I agree with them just because they're my guests. But deep down, I'm like, okay, these guys are liars. They're not telling the truth. But everyone goes through those rough days. How are you able to pull through during those days? Because that's one day. Those days are the things that I really determine whether or not you're a bodybuilder and you're just the average person. Where the average person will come up with a million excuses and just say like, "Oh, I'll work out tomorrow. I'll be fine." And I've done that too. I'll admit it. But with bodybuilders, a lot of times it's like, no, we have to get this done. So how are you able to mentally just get into that mindset of like, you know what, no excuses, I have to get this done?
It's obviously easier if I have a show because I'm like, okay, I have this goal, I need to do it, and you get really motivated. Sometimes I just don't go. Yeah, it really, there's no magic sauce to it. It's like there's times where I'm like, you know what? I trained 6 days this week. my body's exhausted. I don't want to go. So I'm going to take the rest day and I'm not going to feel guilty about it because I know the time I do put in the gym, I'm going to be freaking awesome. On the other side, sometimes I'm like, you know what? Just get your fat ass up. Just go to the gym. Just get in there. Even if you work out for 10, 15 minutes, it's also still better than when you're sitting on the couch. So you get the extremes. It's obviously a lot easier when you have prep to make the decision. Okay, I need to go at least for 15 minutes and get this done. But at the end of the day, if you don't want to go, it's okay. Don't go. Just promise yourself the next day you're gonna go and you're gonna kick.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's one thing that so many people don't understand is that if they ever like take a rest day or whatever like that, they think that their life is over and they think that it's all it's all gonna end. And it's like no, your body first of all needs to rest, and it takes a lot of people a lot of time to figure out when the body's really asking to rest because some people they just think that if they push themselves a little bit that then oh my god I really need to rest. Where it's like no, you need to keep going. So it's all about discovery in this lifestyle really, and everyone's journey is different. Not one person's gonna have the same journey. So and that's a really hard thing for people to swallow, especially in the younger generation where everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday. Where it's like, this is not the lifestyle that you're going to get into if you want to really see like immediate changes. And again, I do have to add though, if that does happen to you, give me a call because I will spend my entire life savings to train
Same.
with you. Then, yeah, everyone on this podcast will as well. So I mean,
Yeah.
if that again, I'm just searching for that person. So anyone listening out there, if that does happen to you, give me your number and I will, I'll do anything to work out with you then because that would be an absolute game changer for me. But if someone were to come up to you, Katie, and say, Katie, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
Huh. One thing I'd like to see changed.
See, we saved the golden questions for the end.
I know. Man, I feel like I should have prepped for this one. One thing I'd like to see changed.
Here, I'll give you mine while you're thinking, just so that you have time to think. So for me, one thing, well, two things actually, is that first of all, have more of a universal judging really because let's be honest, if you went to one show and you were super super lean you might win that show, and then the next show if you did the same look they're like, oh, we want you a little bit more of a fuller look where you get like a different placing. So just like a more universal thing where it's like yeah, it really does depend on the judges too, because let's be honest, it's a whenever anytime you have humans judging other humans there's going to be error no matter what. I mean, it's just trust me, being a baseball pitcher I understand that more than most with umpires where it's like I want to throw the ball right at them where it's just it's ridiculous. But no, I mean it's just if that's one thing I could fix. And then the other thing too is like with the prize money too. I mean, it's like make it more where these people can actually maybe earn a living doing this, where they don't have to have like second jobs and they don't have to worry about that. Where it's like these people put in more work than most athletes of professional sports, and they have to pay for all this stuff. Where it's like make it so that they can at least support themselves and do whatever they need to be able to function in this, and so that they don't have to worry about finance and stuff. Those are the two things for me.
Yeah, to be honest, it would be something that has to do with cost because going into a show, I mean, those Team Marie suits are freaking beautiful, but they're like 2 grand. It's so, and then hair, makeup, tan, and I do also the tan. If there was something else that we could do, then have to, because I'll tell you, I'll give you TMI because when you're a girl and you have to use the bathroom, I have what's called a go girl. And you pee through it so that you don't screw up your tan on your butt. And it's such a pain in the butt. It's the worst. And you can't
It's no,
shower
no,
and
it's literally
you
a pain in the
stink.
butt. It's literally a
Yeah.
pain in the butt.
Yeah. And you stink. And so something with cost and then the tan. The tan is atrocious.
I used to ask about the tan all the time, but then I had guests coming back who were like, okay, we don't want to hear about these guests always talking about that stuff, so I don't ask that anymore. But yeah, the tan is one thing that that is the number one thing, especially for my pale white skin, my pure Scandinavian white, where it's like I could either get burnt to an absolute crisp or I get farmer's tan, where that's not a real thing. So yeah, that's the tan is definitely and in and of itself it's its own thing. But now if we were to talk to you a year from today, and again, if we would have talked a year ago today, and I would have asked you, where would you like to be at a year from now? If you would have predicted a global pandemic and everything that's gone down, I would have bet my entire life savings against you, and I would have lost. So it goes to show that I have no idea what's going to happen now. We could be talking a year from today, and you could see a fire going on behind me. You could hear gunshots. Who knows where the world's going to be at a year from today? But in an ideal world, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at just in your overall life? What are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk to you a year from today?
I want to go to the O. I want to compete on that stage. It could be a year, it could be 10 years, who knows? But that's it's always the ultimate goal.
Yeah, and we wish you nothing but the best in that. I mean, that's definitely, yeah, for anyone that's a goal. And you mentioned that you're coached by Whitney Jones. Did she get second or third at the
So
Olympia
I'm
yesterday?
actually coached by Whitney's coach, Damien.
Oh, okay, okay.
Whitney does my posing.
Oh,
So
okay,
her
yes.
and Damien own Pro Physiques. And so I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, didn't she get like second or third last night? I think she
You
got,
got
yeah,
third. Yep.
third. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's, for so many people don't even realize, just to be able to step on that Olympia stage. I mean, and especially get first call outs and then to get in the top three. I mean, that is an achievement that no one can really take away. And I had Andrea Shaw on the podcast a couple of like in July, and oh my god, and she won the women's bodybuilding one last night too. And I was like, geez, she did like a side bicep thing for me, and I almost had to get a different screen. I was like, you're taking up the full screen for me. It's like come on now. If one person has made me want to go work out more than that, it's her. Well, every guest makes me want to go work out more because I am not in bodybuilder shape like I was before, now that I have this and all this other stuff with COVID. But yeah, and that's amazing that and I think, yeah, definitely the Olympia. I mean, for so many people, that's really the end all goal, and that's awesome. And is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
I don't think so. I'm sponsored by Wicked Natural, so
Wicked
shout out to
Natural.
them.
Okay, so what is Wicked Natural for anyone that's curious? Because I'll leave a link to them down
So
below.
yeah, it is a supplement company, and they're all natural supplements, pre-workouts, greens. They also have CBD. They have anything that you need. But the thing I love, they're not a bunch of fillers. It's just like a real, genuine supplement company.
Well, and you mentioned blackout, and that's one thing. Anytime you name a drink blackout, I'm a little suspicious about that because I was like, oh, what are you trying to do with these people now? But I'll leave a link to all that stuff down below. But again, yeah, Katie, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey. I mean, it was so great to hear from you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
No, thank you so much for having me. This is my first time.
Yeah.
This is very exciting.
She was amazing for her first timer, and everyone will have her on a year from now, and hopefully she'll have just competed in the Olympia, and we'll see what's going on with there. But again, you guys go and give her a follow on her Instagram page. I'll leave a link down below, and buyer beware. You will get inspired to get in shape, and stop eating all those Twinkies just from following her on Instagram. But again, Katie, it was an honor and a privilege to have you on, and we wish you nothing but the best. And everyone, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.